Hey everyone, and welcome with us. This time, we're going to be looking at a movie that came out in 2005 called The Island, and it's all about clones and this kind of question of what makes us human. And we'll be sort of going back and forth a little bit about that today. So
Yeah,
without further ado, let's jump in.
sounds good.
Now, The Island takes place in this, seemingly utopian future where everything's all clean and bright. But we quickly learn that this is a facility full of clones. And these clones think that they are the survivors of some sort of global catastrophe. But the truth is much darker. They're actually being raised to provide organs and other, life-saving procedures for wealthy sponsors on the outside.
It's a really interesting premise, right? I mean, it makes you think about, what it means to be human, what it means to have free will when you're essentially a copy of someone else. And the whole idea of informed consent gets really murky when you're dealing with clones who, well, they don't even know they're clones. I think they're the original.
Yeah, it's like a whole different level of deception and manipulation. So let's talk about our main characters, Lincoln 6 Echo and Jordan 2 Delta. There are two of these clones living in this very structured, controlled environment. They have this whole lottery system that they buy into, hoping to get picked to go to this mythical island paradise. And they're told it's the last uncontaminated place on Earth. But, of course, as the audience, we know better.
Yeah, and this illusion of paradise is so well crafted in the film. Like, you really feel the clones' hope and anticipation for this lottery and, their desire to escape this sterile, kind of controlled environment they're in.
But underneath that, there's this growing sense of unease, right? Like Lincoln, he starts having these dreams, these memories that don't seem to belong to him. And he begins to question the reality of his existence.
And it's that questioning that really sets the plot in motion.
Exactly.
It's like that little spark of doubt that ignites this whole firestorm.
Yeah, and Jordan, she's initially more skeptical of Lincoln's suspicions, but she also has her own reasons for wanting to believe there's something more out there. So when they do finally uncover the truth about their existence and the purpose of this facility, it's a truly horrifying realization.
I mean, imagine finding out that your entire life is a lie, that you're literally grown in a vat, destined to be harvested for parts. It's a terrifying concept.
Absolutely. And the film doesn't hold back in showing the brutality of this system. We see the clones being treated like livestock, their lives completely disposable in the eyes of the people running this facility.
And that contrast between the pristine environment and the horrific reality of what's happening, I think that's one of the things that makes this movie so effective.
Yeah, it's like you're constantly being reminded of the facade, the illusion that's being projected,
Yeah.
and then the curtain gets pulled back and you see the ugly truth underneath.
Right, and for Lincoln and Jordan, that truth is a catalyst for action.
They realize they have to escape,
They have to fight for their right to exist.
and not just for themselves, but for all the other clones who are still trapped in this system.
And that's where the film takes on this sort of almost biblical dimension, right?
Right.
It's like this Exodus story, these people fleeing from captivity, seeking freedom and a promised land. But their journey isn't easy. They're constantly being pursued, hunted by the very people who create them.
Yeah, the stakes are incredibly high, and the film doesn't shy away from the danger and the violence. It's a thrilling chase.
Yeah, it's definitely a white-knuckle ride.
But at the heart of it all, it's a story about the resilience of the human spirit, the unquenchable thirst for freedom. It's about these individuals defying their programming and asserting their right to self-determination. And it raises some profound questions about what truly makes us human.
It really makes you think.
Yeah, and it's those questions that we're going to keep exploring as we continue our dive into the island.
Right, like how do you define your identity when you're essentially a copy?
Exactly. And what are the ethical implications of a society that would create and exploit such beings?
I think The Island really pushes us to confront those uncomfortable truths.
It's a film that stays with you long after you've seen it.
Definitely makes you think about the world in a different way.
All right, so we've laid out the groundwork, we've met our characters, and we've seen them take their first steps towards freedom. But now they're out in the real world, a world they never knew existed.
Mm.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, how are they going to adapt to this new reality?
Exactly. And will they be able to truly break free from the system that created them?
Lots to unpack there.
Absolutely. So stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into the island.
Sounds good. It's funny because when they first get out, they're like fish out of water, right?
Oh, totally. It's like they've been living in this bubble their whole lives.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're thrown into this world that's full of sensory overload. I mean, imagine never having tasted real food or felt the sun on your skin.
Yeah, and all those things that we take for granted, like, the smell of rain. or the feeling of grass under your feet. They're experiencing all of that for the first time.
It's like they're being reborn in a way.
Exactly. And there's this real sense of wonder and amazement in those early scenes. But there's also a lot of fear and confusion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're constantly on edge.
Yeah.
They don't know who to trust. They're being hunted by these mercenaries who are determined to bring them back to the facility.
And they're trying to figure out how to navigate this world that's so different from anything they've ever known.
It's a lot to handle.
It really is. But they're also incredibly resourceful. They learn quickly.
They have to. Right. They're in survival mode.
Exactly. And they start to piece together the truth about the world outside the facility.
Yeah. They learn about the sponsors, the people who paid to have them created.
And the lengths that those people will go to in order to extend their own lives.
Which is pretty disturbing when you think about it.
It is. It raises all these ethical questions about the value of life. And who gets to decide who lives and who dies.
Right. And the film doesn't shy away from those questions. It really makes you think about the kind of society we're creating.
Yeah.
And the potential consequences of our obsession with technology and longevity.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the film portrays technology, right? On the one hand, it's this amazing tool that's capable of creating life and curing diseases.
But on the other hand, it's also this incredibly dangerous weapon.
Exactly. It can be used for good or for evil, depending on the intentions of the people who wield it.
And in the wrong hands, it can be used to control and exploit others.
Which is exactly what's happening in the island.
Yeah, the clones are essentially slaves to this technology. They're created and controlled by it, their lives completely dictated by its demands.
And I think that's one of the things that makes the film so relevant today, because we're living in a world where technology is advancing at an incredible pace.
Right, and we're constantly being presented with new ethical dilemmas.
Like artificial intelligence, gene editing, cloning.
It's a lot to keep up with.
It really is. And the island forces us to confront some of those dilemmas head on.
Yeah, that's a cautionary tale, but it's also a story about hope.
Right. Because despite all the darkness and the brutality, there's this underlying message about the power of the human spirit.
The will to survive, the desire for freedom, the capacity for love.
All of those things are present in the film.
And they're ultimately what allows Lincoln and Jordan to triumph in the end.
Exactly. They find strength in each other and in the people they meet along the way.
And they never give up on their fight for freedom.
Which is inspiring, right?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, it's always possible to fight for what's right.
And to make a difference in the world.
Well said.
So where do you think that leaves our heroes as we head into the final part of the movie?
Well, they've certainly come a long way. They've escaped from the facility, they've learned the truth about their existence, and they've even managed to expose some of the corruption behind the cloning program.
But they're not out of the woods yet.
No, they're still being hunted, and they know that the people who created them won't stop until they're silenced.
So what do you think their next move will be?
Well, I have a feeling they're not going to just run and hide.
Yeah, they're fighters.
They've come too far to give up now.
I think they're going to take the fight to the enemy.
I agree. They're going to try to bring the whole system down.
And expose the truth to the world.
That's a tall order.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think they're up to the challenge.
They've proven themselves to be incredibly resilient and resourceful.
And they have each other.
Which is the most important thing.
Absolutely. So buckle up, folks, because things are about to get even more intense.
Stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into the island.
All right, so picking up where we left off, Lincoln and Jordan, they're now facing this dilemma.
Yeah, they've escaped. They've learned the truth, but what do they do now?
Right. Do they just try to blend in and live out their lives quietly?
Or do they try to fight back and expose the whole system?
And it's not an easy decision, right?
No. I mean, they've seen firsthand how powerful and ruthless the people behind this operation are.
Exactly. They know that if they're caught, they'll be killed. Or worse, sent back to that facility.
But at the same time, they can't just ignore what they've learned.
They feel this moral obligation to do something to help the other clones who are still trapped.
And this is where the film really starts to explore the theme of responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Lincoln and Jordan, they didn't ask to be born into this world.
They were literally manufactured for a purpose that they had no control over.
Yet they're the ones who end up having to make these life or death decisions.
And they're the ones who ultimately have to take responsibility for the consequences of their actions.
It's a lot to put on their shoulders.
It is, but they rise to the occasion.
They find this inner strength and this determination that I think surprises even them.
Yeah, and it's not just about survival anymore. It's about justice.
It's about righting a wrong.
And it's about giving the other clones a chance at a real life.
A life where they can make their own choices and determine their own destinies.
Exactly. And that's what ultimately drives them to take on this seemingly impossible mission.
To expose the truth about the cloning program and bring the whole system down.
And they do it in such a clever way.
Yeah, they use the very technology that was used to create them against their creators.
It's this brilliant act of subversion.
And it's so satisfying to watch.
Oh, absolutely. You're cheering for them every step of the way.
You really are. And the film does a great job of building the tension as they get closer and closer to their goal.
Yeah, you're constantly on the edge of your seat wondering if they're going to get caught.
But they never lose sight of their mission.
And they never give up on each other.
Which is ultimately what allows them to succeed.
They have this incredible bond, this connection that transcends their origins.
It's like they were meant to find each other.
Even though they were created in a lab.
Exactly. And that's, I think, one of the most powerful messages of the film.
That, even in the most artificial of circumstances,
true human connection can still flourish.
It's a reminder that we all have the capacity for love and empathy.
No matter where we come from or how we were created.
And that's a beautiful thing.
It really is. So what do you think the lasting impact of The Island is?
I think it's a film that stays with you.
Definitely.
It raises so many important questions about technology ethics and what it means to be human.
And I think it's more relevant today than ever before.
Given all the advancements we're seeing in fields like artificial intelligence and genetic engineering.
Absolutely. It's a film that forces us to think critically about the choices we're making as a society.
And the potential consequences of those choices.
And it reminds us that we have a responsibility to use our knowledge and our power wisely.
To create a future where technology is used for good.
Not for exploitation or control.
Well said.
So what are your final thoughts on The Island?
I think it's a must-see film for anyone who loves science fiction.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a thrilling ride with a lot of heart and a lot to say about the world we live in.
It's thought-provoking and entertaining in equal measure.
Exactly. And I think it's a film that will continue to spark debate and discussion for years to come.
I agree. So if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend checking it out.
And let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, join the conversation.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into The Island.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time. Keep exploring those big questions and keep the conversation going.